Good morning and welcome to another international blend of know-how this week. I'm very, very happy to welcome another international guest. Today I have Marina Webster with me. Good morning, Marina.
Lovely to meet you. This is very early for me, so I'm sure we'll have a lovely session, but sorry if there's a slight delay in my response.
I appreciate it. I've hyped myself up with coffee. It's not, I'm not a morning person either, but for you it's 7:20 in the UK.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you being here. For our viewers who don't know you, Marina, can you give us a short introduction? Say a couple of sentences about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm a culture and behaviour change specialist, and I've been in this line of work for the last 30 years. I work with companies like GSK, Morgan Stanley, the NHS, government organisations, and started out as a motivational speaker, moved into training, and then the last 15, 20 years, it's been working with boards and senior teams on high performing teams. And that's like leadership coaching as well as team coaching, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect. Your topic makes sense as well, because I'm sure you deal a lot with trust issues, and that's our topic today, isn't it? We're talking about the subtleties of trust, and I'm going to start with a very basic question because it seems simple, but I think sometimes we forget. Why is trust so important, Marina, in teams and in work life in general?
Yes, it is really the key, really, that if you want to have a high performing organisation, a high performing team, there needs to be high trust. And in order to get high trust, you need to be able to, individuals, and particularly at a board level, because the culture sort of cascades down throughout the organisation, but you need people to have high self-awareness, high emotional intelligence, which means they know how to manage themselves and they know how to manage and interact and get the best out of other people. And if the trust has been broken or it's not really there, then it's a bit what we call fake. And whilst organisations can still produce, to do their jobs, they're not at the peak of their game. And you'll find that there'll be spots in the organisations that aren't working that well.
Yeah, so it's also a little bit like it sounds like a slow death,
Yeah.
If trust is not there, you are able to continue to produce output and to continue to perform, but it will one day it'll just blow up, won't it? It won't stay good forever.
That's exactly what happens. So it can be a slow death, and it can just the whole culture in the organisation, it's not performing at its best. So even you can put the best processes in place and have great people in the organisation, but if the trust isn't there, like you say, it can either be like a slow death and it does blow up at some point.
And I think
you've got carnage.
Yeah, and when you hit that point, when you come to that point where it blows up, I think it's quite difficult then to salvage the situation, isn't it? To kind of
yeah, that's a great thing to ask, because when one of the years and years ago, I read a great book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and I did become a facilitator for them, and there's a whole chapter on trust, and he talks about it being like an emotional bank account. So you can be in credit and you can be in debt or debit, can't you? And the thing with the emotional bank account, if we look at trust like an emotional bank account, that generally speaking, people go into jobs, into teams, trusting people. But once the emotional bank account, once the trust has been broken, it's that thing about, can you ever get it back? And the average is it needs what we call 30 deposits, 30 credits to get it back to zero. But ideally, we don't want the trust to get broken at all. And what's interesting, people view, we're quite complex individuals, and so are teams and so are organizations. So what one person thinks is trustworthy, another person could see it as untrustworthy. And so you have to be very mindful of that.
That's an interesting point that you raised, because when I think about or causes of lack of trust, I mean, there's the obvious things, I guess, like lying or saying something and doing the other. And what other causes are there? Because you're
Yes.
saying there's sometimes causes that we don't perceive or we don't feel like lack of trust.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if I just talk about some of the subtler things, so there's the obvious things that you've just mentioned, and so I am going to just refer to my notes, but it's things like people being moody, or constantly being criticised, or sort of nitpicking, that they can, that people go, oh, we have said a few positive things, but it's something about things not being good enough, that they're sort of nitpicking at things. So criticism, being a bit dictatorial, if you haven't got a high collaboration, this thing about people sort of dictating, the sort of the old ways of doing things, which was much more hierarchical, can do it. Constant lateness, that's an interesting one. This is a classic where somebody's always late, and it starts off where people don't mind, but the people that are always on time, at a subtle level, that will be a withdrawal in the trust. I've had it just as a sort of funny thing, but two other examples would be, the boss says, I'll take you out to dinner, and that, because let's say someone's been standing in all week for them, the boss says at the end of the week, I'll take you out to dinner, and they just take them out to the local McDonald's, and that person was thinking, it's gonna be, these are stories I've heard. The other, and then being really furious about it, thinking, well, I don't even like McDonald's, but just kind of going along with it. Now somebody else might go, oh, that's fine, it's just a quick meeting, I want to get home to my family, it's fine. Things like emails. I had one guy when I was running, I run sessions on this, that if people didn't respond to his emails within a day or two, he would regard that as untrustworthy. And other people, where they leave voice messages and people don't get back. So I think if it's a continuum of these little habits, and people think, oh, it's okay, we get on all right, it has a big impact, actually. Well, it impacts the trust levels, let's say that. Hiding feelings, when people aren't transparent. Now, I know it's very important that as professionals, we need to be professional, but there's something about, not just being like a poker face, that you kind of let people know a bit about what's going on. Making excuses, this thing that there's always an excuse why that project's late. It might be very valid, but when it happens on an ongoing basis, then the trust starts going. And also in teams, you get what we call clicky groups, and it's just that those people get on. I'm working on something at the moment where there's a merger going on, and the old team are really close, and the new people coming in want to get involved, but the clickiness,
that just kind of happens, though. I mean, when you in the workspace, in the teams, people get along, click forming. They go to lunch each day together and gossiping. That just kind of happens. Isn't that just natural? I mean,
I think it is natural that people get on and they want to talk. I think gossiping's, generally people like gossip. That's why there's all these dramas and things on soaps on TV. And gossip can create a form of intimacy. But what goes on subconsciously, so I work at the level of identity, values and beliefs, and conscious and subconscious. But subconsciously, what goes on, say like you and I were gossiping about someone, subconsciously I might be thinking, gosh, I better not upset Marina, because if I do, there'll be gossip going on about me. So whilst in some ways it's, so there's quite a difference if we're helping people manage this. There's quite a difference if I came to you and said, look, I've got a problem with so-and-so, can you help me talk it through and go and go and speak to them. That's quite different to having a good gossip about them.
Yeah.
So
that makes me wonder, because these are all things that, as you say, some people perceive maybe as lack of trust, but a lot of the times the constant lateness, or for example, that's just something that you tend to put down, or colleague so and so, that's just how he or she is, that's just their personality. It's not, they don't really mean a bad thing. So when would be a good idea to review trust in your teams? Because I can imagine in general, teams or leaders, they think, oh, we've got good trust, we're a good team, we get along. But if it's these kind of like individual subtle things that some people don't even perceive, when would it be a good time to review these?
I think that's a really good question, and there's quite a big answer to that, really. I mean, there's two parts. Part of it is, when people are having one-to-one appraisals or the personal development reviews, that's a time individually to look at that individual and to think about, their development areas, and that would be part of it. But in terms of the wider team, that obviously all organisations generally have a vision and a set of principles or values of how they work together. And with a team, I think it's really important to review those on a regular basis, particularly in the early days. If you've got a new leader coming in, or you've got other team members coming in, that's a good time to do it. But also we can get complacent. So I think it's important that the manager or director of that team, we can have the real conversations about how we're working. Are we living and breathing our values? Are there things that we can do to step up a bit more? And it's like anything in life, it's like going to the gym once. It's not going to make much of a difference. It's the same principle, that it's worth reviewing regularly, actually. And make sure that they're living the principles of how they want to work together. And if you haven't got those, it's important that teams do have them and that we hold each other accountable. And I can give you a great example of a team that I was working with where most of them had children, not all of them, but most have had children. And two people said, can I come in early at 7 o'clock and leave at 3 so I can do the school run? And the boss said, yeah, that's fine. But then the others started to do that, and it was the accounts department. And then it got to a stage where no one was in the office after 3. So the phone could be ringing and there was nobody there. So these little habits, if you like, can form, and that they need tackling.
Yeah. So I hear that it's important to understand your team members and what drives them to build trust or to act trustworthy. You need to understand what drives them. Is that correct?
Yes. So one of the most important things is that you understand, and each team member understands what drives and motivates other people in that team. Because if you know what that is, and this is again where we come in terms of facilitating those sorts of scenarios, but we can give people what they want rather than imposing our values and what's important to us onto them. And a funny story or funny example is Christmas presents. People generally tend to buy Christmas presents they wouldn't mind themselves, right? So this is an example. So so when the person opens a present, they have to put on the happy face, I'd never wear this in a million years, or whatever it is. So it's not that people don't care, they do care, but they tend to put on, we tend to live by our own values and think that other people automatically will too, but they don't, they're different. And that's why it's really important to value and respect differences. But in order to do that, we need to know what is important to that person. And I think sometimes people, people pleasers, if you like, there's a lot of us that people pleasers will kind of just go along with what the other people want or the other person wants, but it's not really then. And at some point that comes out, it needs to come out. So there is something with high performing teams about valuing and respecting differences. But first of all, we've got to know what's driving and motivating someone.
So how do you do that in practice? I mean, if I imagine like you get called into a team or, you know, as an expert because they have trust issues, how do you build this trust? How do you get people I'm missing the words here. What do I mean? How do I get the team to act like or to try to understand their team members, not just their own behavior?
It's a great question. It's a brilliant question. So the first thing is to be able to really be in their shoes for a bit. Yes, so there's something about people being their authentic self. How do we get people to be their authentic self? Well, first of all, they need to feel safe that they can be, and it's good to be your authentic self. And there's some exercises and things we can do to get really clear on what's really important to that person. So it's a personal thing that someone would then would do some work with them, and then they would share with the rest of the group. This is what's really important to me. This is how to get the best out of me at work. These are the things that work. These are the things that don't. This is how I prefer to give and receive information, because, you know, you get different communication and thinking styles. So if we know that the different thinking and communication styles people have in the room. So for example, I'm a driver. I'd much rather someone ring me than send lots of emails. If people know that, then you go, oh, I know how to get the best out of Marina. I'll just ring a and vice versa. I do the same for them. If they need reflection time, if they prefer, you know, so it's this thing about having a big part of this is about having the real conversations, having the crucial conversations, being able to have difficult conversations, but the real conversations, and to really celebrate and celebrate the differences, if you like. And part of my mission, and I'm doing it, I've been doing this for 30 years now, is about helping create organizations that are highly collaborative and creative. And the way you do that is by understanding the different individuals in the team. So there's ways of doing it, you know, facilitated workshops and listening, you know, it's all sorts of things. And being mindful, I think, for senior managers and team members of not imposing your style onto them. You know, we want to have standards for that team and for that business, and that's fine. It's not about taking away from high standards, but it's about understanding and encouraging people to be their authentic self.
So if you have for managers or team members who might have a feeling, okay, we might have a trust issue, do you have any, like, your top tips? What should they do if they suspect there's a trust issue? What can they do?
Yeah, well, it's that piece of getting everyone practicing them. So if I just say how I work with individuals on this, first of all, I'll see them on a one-to-one basis. So the manager or HR possibly could do this, but you see people on a one-to-one basis to really step into their shoes about what's life like for them, what's really important to them, what's really helping them in their career, what's hindering them in their career. And you do that with everybody, and you'll get some common themes come out of that. And normally, because the trust issues, as we say, they can be so subtle, but you can tell in those conversations, these are some of the areas that we need to work on. So we kind of see them on a one-to-one, and then get everybody together. But we'd start with the common themes, but also where we want to go to. Do you see what I mean? It's that thing about this is where we are currently, this is where we want to go to. These are the things that we need to work on. And there's some great activities. So you gain trust. So if I'm doing it, I'm gaining trust with everybody. They completely trust me. They know I'm representing all of them in that room. Then we can get down to the trust issues, but in a constructive way. And we do it with feedback and what we're going to do differently and things like that, but group feedback.
Yeah, you just mentioned a great point there, because you're there representing everybody, because from what I've heard now, because this topic is all the subtleties and it's so complicated and it's so inward, you know, it's so intimate. I think it is the top tip would be to get outside help, because as you said, you need somebody who is neutral, who represents the interests of everybody. And also maybe because you have a fresh pair of eyes, or that external partner, you need somebody with a fresh pair of eyes.
Definitely. I have seen managers and sometimes HR have a go at it, but because they're part of the mix, they almost need to be a participant of that. So what happens, we would do some work with them like that, and we'd agree the principles, we'd agree about how we're going to hold each other accountable going forwards, not in a heavy way, but we can all slip, can't we? Once we've done that, once we've agreed that, it tends to it's all these things are sort of incremental, aren't they? But it takes it up 2 or 3 notches. And once you are part of a high performing, trustworthy team, people never want to leave that team generally. They just love the way it works together. So, or they find it hard. People do progress, but it's a sadness when you've worked with a really great, fun, high performing team, and creative team, you don't kind of want to leave it.
Yeah, so it's really worth it reflecting on the not so obvious things within your team, I guess. Marina, I'm looking at the clock. I could talk to you forever, to be honest, but we're at the end already.
That's fantastic. I think the main message is don't let it be, this thing, and don't leave it. But don't make a big deal of it either. There's ways of dealing with it that work really well.
Yes, and try to reflect the not so obvious signs. And thank you very much for your input, Marina. Thank you. Ruth Kaiser says thank you. Hi, Ruth.
Thank you.
Here almost every morning. I love it. If you have, through this conversation, maybe have the feeling that you could have trust issues or in your team and you need support, then as always, I can only say contact us. You will find our contact details at the bottom of the YouTube video. And we will forward every request to Marina, who is an expert in trust building in high performing teams. And I think you're more than happy to review something to help. I'm missing my words this morning. It's too early here.
No, you caught my feeling, but that's it. I think we did that. Okay, so that's good. It's lovely to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching this International Cup of Coffee. I will see you next Thursday. If you've not put a thumbs up on our YouTube channel yet, then please do so and you will miss nothing. Have a lovely Thursday.